Have you ever stopped to think about what actually happens inside a vegetable when it gets, say, bumped or bruised? Well, believe it or not, the humble sweet potato is hiding a fascinating genetic detective story, a secret defense mechanism that scientists are just now starting to understand.
So why should you care about a sweet potato secrets? Well, let's talk scale for a second. We're talking about a staggering 130 million tons of sweet potatoes produced around the globe every single year. For millions of people, especially in the developing world, this isn't just a side dish, it's a vital staple food. And that's not just some random question. For a crop this important, any damage after it's been pulled from the ground can lead to huge problems. And that simple question? Well, that's what kicks off our entire investigation today.
So let's start at the beginning. Our story really kicks off not in some high-tech lab, but out in the fields and in storage houses where there's this massive, real-world challenge of food waste.
You know, a tiny little cut, a simple bruise. You might think, what's the big deal? But here's the thing. Those small blemishes are basically open doors for rot and decay. And when you're dealing with millions of tons of food, those little injuries add up to absolutely staggering losses, which threatens food security right where it's needed the most.
So, the big question is, how does a sweet potato fight back? This is where our detective story really gets going, right at the scene of the crime, the exact moment that skin gets broken.
Think of it like an invisible, silent alarm going off. The second that injury happens, a flurry of activity starts deep inside the plant's cells. So, naturally, researchers were super curious. They wanted to understand this immediate, genetic first response. What exactly is happening in those first crucial moments right after the wound?
Okay, so to catch this genetic response in the act, scientists had to be really precise. They set up this careful timeline where they scraped the skin off sweet potatoes, and then, like clockwork, they took samples, right at the moment of injury, then 2 hours later, 4 hours later, and finally a combined sample from 8 and 12 hours post-injury. They were basically hunting for the genetic fingerprints of the first responders. And boom! This is what they found. You can literally see the evidence right here. Each one of those bright bands you're looking at, that's an activated gene. And check this out. If you look at that middle column for IPH41, you see that band gets way brighter at the 2-hour mark. That's an early responder right there. But then IPH23 and IPH74, they show up stronger a bit later. This was their first major clue.
Okay, so they knew something was kicking off, but they didn't know the who. Which specific genes were doing all the work? The next logical step was to launch a full-on genetic manhunt.
And here's how they did it. It was like a 4-step process. First, they pulled out the genetic messengers. You can think of these as the instruction manuals, also called RNA, right from the wound. Second, they made stable copies of those instructions. Third, they used this really cool technique to basically fish out only the genes that were going wild after the injury. And finally, step 4, they isolated these special genes so they could get a positive ID.
And get this, the hunt was a total success. It led them straight to 3 prime suspects. So now, it was time to build a profile on each one and figure out exactly what they were dealing with.
So let me introduce you to our main characters, IBH23, IBH41, and IBH74. Now, at first glance, it looked like they all belonged to a very well-known, very powerful family of proteins in the sweet potato world.
And that powerful family? It's called Sporamin. This stuff is a huge deal. It's the sweet potato's main storage protein, making up a massive 60 to 80% of its total protein. Think of it as the dominant family in town. And scientists already knew it played a role in defense, but it turns out there was a lot more to the family story. So the researchers did a background check. They compared the genetic code of our suspects to a huge database of known proteins. And just look at this chart. The tallest bars here show exactly what they expected, a clear relationship to Sporamin A and Sporamin B. No surprise there. But here's where it gets really interesting. Look at these other connections. They also showed similarities to things like miraculin and trypsin inhibitors, both of which are famous defense proteins in other plants. This was a huge surprise. Our suspects had ties to a whole world of plant defense that nobody expected.
And this, my friends, brings us to the climax of the whole story. Were these just ordinary members of the Sporamin family, or were they something totally new? To find out, the scientists had to put them into a genetic lineup. This was the crucial question. After all that work, where do IBH23, IBH41, and IBH74 actually belong in the grand scheme of things?
And this genetic family tree, what scientists call a phylogenetic tree, It gives us the stunning answer. Okay, look closely. Down at the bottom left, you see the cluster for class 1, that's Sporamin A. Right above it, you've got class 2, which is Sporamin B. But now, follow the lines all the way to the top. Bam! Our 3 suspects, they don't fit into either of those known groups. They form their own distinct branch, a brand new subfamily that the researchers have now labeled class 3.
Okay, so they found a whole new branch on the genetic family tree. That's super cool for science, but so what? Why does this actually matter to you and me? Let's connect this all the way back to that bruised sweet potato we started with.
All right, let's break down what this all means. First, and this is huge, a whole new subfamily of defense proteins has been discovered, hiding in plain sight in one of our most common foods. This new knowledge could be a game changer for breeding sweet potatoes that are naturally tougher and more resilient. And, of course, understanding this wound healing mechanism is a major step toward cutting down on that massive post-harvest food waste we talked about. And finally, this isn't just about sweet potatoes. This discovery could give us clues to help protect other vital crops too.
You know, this whole investigation just goes to show you that even in the most familiar foods, there are these complex, incredible stories unfolding at a level we can't even see. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other natural secrets are just waiting to be discovered in the food we eat every single day?